Hmm? Ah!
Really?
Yes,
You were an ancient vampire. You could read any mind you want.
I was in love.
You buy that?
I buy that he'd been in power a long time. You can get lazy.
It was love.
Okay. And love. He was loving in those days? Sure. Love.
Rashid, did you and Mr. Malloy talk to anyone during dinner?
Just the chef when ordering, sir.
Were you with Mr. Malloy the entire dinner?
He used the restroom for approximately 5 minutes.
Had a piece of halibut that still wanted to swim.
You were not to leave Mr. Malloy alone.
He didn't. Stood by the hand dryer like a creep.
Why do you ask? Love.
Hey listeners, welcome to the show. I'm Danny.
And I'm Mark.
And I'm Lara.
This is a spoilful podcast about Interview with the Vampire, Season 2, Episode 6. Like the light by which God made the world before he made the light.
And the synopsis for this particular episode is Armand finally brings up the elephant in the room as he accounts for the missing memories that Louis requested to be erased in Paris. Claudia makes her own huge request of Louis.
All right, I do want to say that we have a special guest joining us today. The one who introduced me to the world of Anne Rice created. Welcome to the show, Billie.
Hey.
Hi, Billie. Welcome.
Welcome.
So I just kind of want to get your thoughts on the first season of Interview with the Vampire.
I mean, I like it so far, but as a stickler for source material, I had my qualms with it. It took a long time for me to start doing somersaults in my living room, honestly. But there are bits and pieces of it where I was like, okay, I like where this is going. I don't like what they did to this character, but I like where this is going. It is good as a vampire show, so I'm still glued to my TV every time it comes on.
And how about the second season so far?
I much prefer the second season over the first season. I like what they've done with the Théâtre des Vampires, and I like what they're doing with Claudia's character, especially how they're making nods at her maturity and everything that's going on with that.
Who are your favorite characters so far?
Santiago.
I have
awesome.
to agree with that too, Billie, too. Trust me.
Well, like I was telling Billie, I didn't like Santiago in the movie because for me he was too goofy and not like, I don't know, I just didn't like that character. But the character that's being portrayed on the show is so different, and just like I prefer just not only how deviant he is, but just how he's a great actor bringing Santiago just chef's kiss.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's go into this week's episode. Mark, what are your general thoughts?
I really quite enjoyed the episode, but there were a lot of shock and awe moments at this particular episode based upon Louis, Claudia, the very ending, obviously, and everybody. We already said spoilerful. Holy poop! I was like, oh my goodness, we're getting it. And we are getting what we've been wanting and looking for, because all we had was a ghost version of this person. And I could feel the whole chess play between Daniel, Armand, and Louis. And when we get that criticism at the very beginning by somebody from the Telemasca saying, oh, you have to be wary of the other one. And and then you kind of figure that out during this episode. It was jaw-dropping because it was a difference in Louis completely that you didn't believe. And now you're like, so who's in charge? What's going on? Holy poop. So, yeah, that's my thoughts.
Do you have a rating for it, Mark?
I definitely give it an 8.8 out of 10 of the series so far. And I was definitely entertained. Definitely enjoyed it, and it was very, very much intriguing based upon the story and how it's going. but leaving us off with that cliffhanger was just like, oh no, I don't want to wait another week.
How about you, Laura?
I don't know. This week there were some scenes and dialogue that I really liked, things that I really liked. And then of course that last 10 seconds just like had me jumping up and down in my seat. So, that was kind of worth it. But overall, it kind of felt like a slow burn art house film. And I do love an art house film, but it was just kind of like, oh, okay, this is nice. Okay, this is interesting. And then wham, the ending just made it great. So for this week, I give it like 7.5 out of 10 stakes to the face of potential rapists and their co-conspirators.
Yeah.
So this week, I actually was my favorite out of what we've seen so far. The beginning, just with Daniel talking to the real Rashid, and then just kind of getting what I thought we weren't going to get, because I didn't think that Madeline was ever going to be brought up into the show. I thought they were just going to have Claudia join the other vampires or vampires. I don't know. And then
don't
just
worry,
kinda,
I get it wrong too, Danny. It's okay.
I didn't think we were going to get this companion for Claudia. So seeing this come to fruition is exciting but sad at the same time, especially knowing what the outcome may be. Yeah, so I gave this episode 9.9 stakes to the face. Almost
Nice.
perfect. How about you, Billy? What are your thoughts on this episode?
It was probably the best of the season so far because action starts to happen. And like you said, it was like it's a slow burn. This whole season has been a slow burn, but now the action is starting to happen. We get hints about Lissette's presence in this whole situation, which I mentioned to you earlier today, that his presence in the trial that's coming up, that is part of the book. In the book, he is in there. So he's very small part, and he's definitely not the presence he's projected to be in this next episode. But I like that. And I also kind of like the idea that maybe Santiago is getting more help outside of the theater than we've been led to know on, because one of Santiago's abilities was that he's a mimic. So that part when Armand's trying to play him to play the rest of the vampire, but Santiago's playing Armand instead, it's sort of like maybe that's one of his abilities. He's mimicking Armand. He's playing Armand because that's his vampire skill. So I gave this one an 8 out of 10 just because there's always margin for improvement. But I really was satisfied with what was going on here, and I loved the relationship between Claudia and Madeline, because in the one with Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, Madeline's taking on this mother figure, but they wanted to definitely emphasize the fact that no, Madeline's insinuating on being a lover of Claudia, and that kind of contributes to this whole Claudia being seen as more mature now in her vampire years. So I really like that.
Nice. All right, so we're gonna go off last week because I kind of like that we did that episode breakdown. So we're gonna kind of break down the episode again, and we're gonna start with what we get is the first scene. Daniel has dinner with the real Rashid. Rashid.
Yeah.
Rashid. Wow. Sorry, my personality.
It works. We have fun here, everybody.
Yes. Anyhow, so we have Daniel talking about the tapes, and then we get one of the members from Talamasca kind of warns Daniel about, don't be afraid of Armand, be afraid of the other one.
Yeah, Ragland was the one.
Mhm.
And actually, Daniel winds up like kind of 911 texting him to come to help him at that point. He goes, oh, Rashid's here? Oh, he loves the hand soap here in the bathroom. And blah, blah, blah. Mind you, they knew. The Talamasca knew. It's as if Rashid was implanted into
Mhm.
their dwellings, so that way Daniel wasn't alone. So he was kind of like a bodyguard to some degree, but also to guide Daniel in some way. I'm still thinking in the back of my head, Rashid was sending him the stuff right away through his computer as he was getting all that stuff right away for the past number of episodes when they were showing up from the Talamasca, all this information. Now, mind you, it's I love how Armand actually brings it up, saying he kind of grills Daniel about it. Well, where was Rashid? Oh, I was right next to him and I was handing him the hand soap. And
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty cool. But in the fact that, it's like, oh, and Rashid's like, I have to use the powder room. And he leaves. And then there's the other guy from the Talamasca. And it's like, oh, wow, it's all coming together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this confirms that Rashid is a Talamasca agent, and I don't know how he's getting away with that without Armand knowing.
He knows how to cloud his mind and clear his mind. So the Talamasca, I think, over the years has been able to mask their thoughts in order to do that. And Billy's agreeing with me with his head shakes. But but the thing is that I think that's literally exactly what's going on here. And I just love what that the guy actually states. It's like, oh, you're an asset, and Malloy is like, I'm not an asset. I just want to live. I want to put out my book and live. He goes, well, and pretty much he's like told, well, you might not have it both ways.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Billy, about this part of the episode?
Well, they make a point, Reglan makes a point that to Daniel about the fact that no Talamasca member has gotten close to a vampire and either lived or not walked away without the dark gift. Daniel's the only individual that they know of to have not only an interview, but to stay human afterwards. So without wanting to, he became an operative of the Talamasca. And the thing about Rashid is, if he is a hidden member of the Talamasca, of course he's going to have the ability to close his mind up. As far as I know, most members of the Talamasca are trained psychics. So he obviously, they can move amongst vampires silently and invisibly. And unless they, like the vampires, expose themselves, no one knows that they're there. So I just really liked that they kind of threw him in there like that, and he didn't realize he's being used on either side.
Yeah. And I like that to this point, they haven't said the T word yet on the show.
Yeah.
Even if you're watching that other horrendous show on AMC, the Mayfair Witches, you will know who the Talamasca is. I know we do not. That is the show we do not speak of. So Billy, I'm a big fan of the Mayfair Witches books, not so much the show.
So then we're like fire and ice, because I didn't really get into the witch books. I was all Vampire Chronicles. I tried to so hard. It wasn't until I actually started watching the show that I started to actually read the Mayfair Witch books. So you'll have more say so on that than I would, unfortunately.
I really wish the show had turned out as good as the books, but in my opinion, it didn't. But either way, the Talamasca from there. But so far on this show, they have not dropped the T word. We saw it real quick on Daniel's laptop, but we have not heard their name yet.
Oh, I guess we haven't. I didn't even think about
Daniel, that. Didn't Daniel actually state it?
Did he say Talamasca?
No, I don't think he did.
I thought he did.
I don't think so.
If you listeners are out there, and please correct us, I thought I heard it, but let us know.
All right, so that brings us to the next point. The Theater de Vampire slowly rise against Armand. Tensions are high as Daniel and Louis confront Armand about this, and we start to see Santiago kind of move the coven to start collecting information on where Lestat is at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's
I love
kind
that
of
we
tedious.
get a glimpse of the ongoing coup by the rest of the troupe, because they're writing a new play, and of course, kind of like this show, there's no roles for women in the play. Maybe a couple in this show, but there's no roles for the women. So Santiago takes advantage of that and sends his girlfriends Celeste and Estelle to go talk to the solicitor for Lestat, which is pretty cool because we get to see Santiago's power to actually stand there on stage and do his soliloquy while still sending out psychic directions to his cooperatives, and concentrate on both at the same time. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. I just love that because the fact that he was able to put out his dialogue for the play, which he deemed as being bad, but at the very end, in his head, as he's leaving, he tells the playwright, who is one of the other people, he goes, "It's a really good script," blah blah blah, and he keeps moving. But he's able to have that conversation with the two women, which Armand didn't realize was missing. He had everybody else that was there that was meant for the play, and they're there investigating when was the last time, and literally Santiago feeding them the dialogue of when was the last time that you saw Lestat de Leocourt, and when was the actual date, the time, everything down to the detail. And that was so it was so technical and tactical.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Armand couldn't even read Santiago at that point during the play as he was doing this and communicating with these two women, it's so devious and so genius. And it makes me think of or forecast what's going to happen because of what happens to the Theatre de Vampire later on, because we know it burns down. I have a funny feeling that this is a culmination of everything that happens with Claudia, with this whole thing with Lestat de Leocourt, as well as with Louis. And it's we're building up. So we're now at episode 6. We only have 2 more episodes, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So I have a funny feeling we're going to end at episode 8. And this is my prediction, everybody. You can tell me I'm wrong, but I have a funny feeling it's going to end at the time when the theater burns down. And that's about it. And then we're going to get left off with a cliffhanger for season 3.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, I had this point of at the end of the season where Lestat shows up in Dubai and says, "Oh, interesting story that you've been weaving here. How about I tell you what actually happened?" And then he kind of takes over and it kind of becomes Lestat's point of view, since we are going to kind of go into Lestat taking over. So that was my guess and still my prediction. But then again, now we have Lestat, because we thought it was the end. We weren't going to see Lestat after Louis kind of said his goodbyes to Lestat and was going to give himself to Armand. I thought we weren't going to see him for the rest of the season, but here we are seeing him at the end of this episode. And so
yeah, we got Sebastian Bach at the very end showing up, looking into
Well, it's kind of implied in the Vampire Lestat that everything that Louis wrote in Interview with the Vampire said to Daniel was fallacious anyway. So I wouldn't run it. It wouldn't be a huge surprise if the next season after would be Daniel being like, "Okay, we got your guys' side of the story. What's your side, Lestat?" And then it's going to be this whole other narrative in which these characters are doing these things instead of what we thought they were doing. And I honestly do truly believe that Santiago is getting help from Lestat with this whole coup on the theater anyway. So,
well, I feel, for one, I would like to know who Santiago's maker is, because he is an extremely powerful vampire in the show. He has the ability to send out psychic messages. He can do his, mimicking power, but he can fly. And these aren't powers that we really see him have in the book or the film. So he's pretty OP in the show. And I hope somewhere in the show they tell us who his maker is, which would be really cool. But or if he's gotten blood from an even stronger vampire.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
as I watched this the first time, there were times when I was feeling sorry for Armand. I'm like, no, don't you make me feel sorry for you, Armand, with your little doe eyes and sad face. And as I'm watching it, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't believe for 1 second Armand is letting the troop get away with this behind his back. I think he is fully aware of what is going on because he is so powerful. In one of the episodes, he was able to freeze the entire restaurant and make his troop bow their heads to him. There's no way they're sending out these psychic messages and doing all this plotting behind his back without his knowledge.
Yeah.
Was he blinded by love?
I do not believe the blinded by love story for 1 second.
Daniel implies that he was doing something behind the scenes, and Louis quickly steps in and goes, he was blinded by love. And Daniel's like,
Shit.
Exactly.
Eh.
And then we also get like behind the scenes as Louis is like talking to Armand, and he's just like, turn around. You can tell me as I'm having sex with you. I'm like, are you serious? I was like, oh my god.
It was
Louis becoming the dom here. He's just
yeah. It was the first
Armand
time we
around?
saw Louis take control of within the relationship. And that shocked me. And I'm like, whoa. Now he's the dominant partner and he's treating Armand like, okay, you're below me, you're secondary, and you're gonna listen to me. And it's so sad because how Armand was so strong with his leadership with the coven, the theater, everything. And on top of that, in training and saying, do you trust me to Louis? Now it's like the shift of everything. And we do see a little bit more of the whole painting thing within this, about the paintings and their value and their trading and their selling within this episode as well, which Louis takes more control over of their investments and to move forward with. So
because he's such a capitalist. Armand calls him.
Yeah, technically. And, honestly, I'm starting to feel a little bit more for Armand at this point. And not maybe because he's got pretty eyes and a pretty face, but but honestly, it's like I felt more for Armand in this episode.
Well, my thing is like, is a dom truly a dom? Because at some point the sub has to give permission to the dom. So I wonder if Armand is allowing him. Maybe the trick wasn't. Maybe this trick wasn't against Santiago. It was Louis all along.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets interesting towards the end there when we get to that end scene, wondering what Armand's play in this whole thing is.
Yeah,
exactly.
And Armand's been pretty manipulative up until this point, so it's like this is not out of character for him to act this way.
So
yeah, you probably know, Billie, from the books that Armand in the books is like a 17-year-old boy.
Yeah.
So I find it interesting, even though they've aged him up in the show, he still has that sweet, doe-eyed, innocent appeal to him that Armand from the books has, which just disguises how truly like manipulative and sneaky he can be.
Well, and it always amused me that Claudia was condemned for being an infant vampire, but technically speaking, Armand wasn't supposed to exist either.
Yes.
But he used his Botticelli features to charm the Rome, I think it was the Rome Satanic Coven leader, into letting him continue on. And that's sort of his vampire ability, which is to charm. They call it like the glamour spell or something like that. That seems to be his vampiric ability.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, like Mark said, he's almost making me feel bad for him. And I'm like, no, don't fall for it. I'm not going to fall for it.
Yeah.
All right. So now we move on to Madeline gets attacked. We have 3 drunk individuals who break into Madeline's shop. And then we also see Claudia expose herself as a vampire.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even really break in. They're trying to paint another swastika on her window that she just keeps cleaning off. And at this point, she's just had it with them and tosses her iron at the window, breaking it open, which allows them into the shop.
Oh, I didn't even catch that. Okay.
Yeah. It was a bullying tactic that they were consistently doing, and she just had it and just threw the iron through there as she was ironing a dress or some sort of fabric. And it got to that point where this made me uncomfortable, honestly, because it was at that point of rape, what they were doing to this woman. And it made me so sad. And I was like worried as I was watching it. And when I saw the blood on the floor with Claudia there, I was like, oh, I'm happy now. I don't know why, because she came to her aid and was like, and then she exposed herself as being a vampire.
Well, you guys know I had issues with them having a sexual assault on Claudia last season. I didn't like it, and I felt kind of like a lazy writing trope to me. And then we only have one other main female character in Madeline, and I was like, oh God, they're not going to do another
not again.
sexual assault on a woman on the show. And it got there, and Claudia came in time. I was just sitting there tense the whole time going, I knew Claudia was going to come and help her and save her, but I almost thought that it was going to be too late and that she was going to get there after it happened. And I was just going to, she would find out it happened and then she would go on a revenge streak and kill them. I'm very glad she came before the incident happened, but I was like, God, not again. I just didn't want it.
That's what I thought in the back of my head. I'm like, they can't do this. It's a continuous trope. And I'm glad that Claudia intervened and did what she had to do because of her love for Madeline. And it's a deep love. I love how they mention later on it's not sexual yet. but the thing is that I'm loving the fact that it was a lot of feeling within it and protection. But you could also correspond that with what happened with Armand and Louis too. Was that an assault or was that just somebody proving their dominance over somebody else with Louis and Armand during that scene?
No, Armand seemed pretty consensual.
Okay. Yeah. All right, good. As long as it's there. That's all I needed to know.
What do you guys think of that scene?
With Claudia.
Yeah, Claudia.
Go ahead, Billie.
Well, okay. So the Claudia revealing herself to Madeline was not as cataclysmic as I expected it to be, because it had always been hinted at that Madeline had been socially ostracized because of her involvement with the Nazi soldier back when the war was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it would manifest itself in a different way. Because like in the novels, the only reason why Madeline wanted to become a vampire was because Claudia resembled her dead daughter. So right now, I guess I was waiting for something more anchoring to keep Madeline with Claudia. And when speeding along, just to prove my point, but when she was being transformed, Louis mentions that he saw Claudia through her eyes. And I thought that was nice, but I don't feel like that's cataclysmic enough to make somebody want to become an immortal. In that way, I guess.
I kind of had a thought on that. When they're both sitting there and Claudia's talking to Madeline, and first she tells her not to run, not to scream, and the fact that Madeline doesn't, she's not calm, but she tries not to freak out, and I do wonder what would have happened if she had run and screamed. I wonder if Claudia would have to take care of her, but she doesn't. She stays relatively calm. And in the back of my mind, Mark's going to love this. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, say it out loud.
Okay. All right.
Because she couldn't say vampire. It's Edward and Bella in the forest.
I know.
I do love that.
No,
that
we
she
don't talk
wouldn't-
about glitter vampires here. Trust me.
I really loved the scene that when Claudia was telling her to be calm and not run away, and she did it because I think she feels like an outsider, just like Claudia does.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that was shock. Like, because I would be shocked and I wouldn't know how to react. Because your fight or flight would kick in.
Mhm.
And it's like she just sat there and was like, this
She
is happening.
froze.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she was like, what do I do? Do I run? Do I stay? But
Heck no, not me. I'd be one of those. I always knew.
you're a vampire, Edward.
I knew it.
Now turn me.
I
Now.
know.
And I did not feel bad for those two guys, that woman who was their co-conspirator or the neighbor across the street. They all fucking deserved it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was so like shocked when I saw that scissor in her throat. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And then I was not expecting it when they like panned over to the doorway and all of a sudden you see this door just fly at one of the guys. I was like, oh crap,
Yeah. And then we got the blood splatter on the camera too.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I was with you. I was like, please don't let it be one of those things where she gets assaulted and then Claudia has to do this whole like revenge thing after the fact. So I am glad that we do have Claudia arriving right like before anything major happens. And even I am glad that the shop owner across the way gets his comeuppance because he's just been an a-hole like this whole time. And so
Mhm.
just having him to stand there like smirking the whole time, I was like, ugh,
Yeah.
something bad better happen to you.
Well, they were all complicit in it, so yeah.
Yeah. See here. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next. Claudia wants Madeline to be turned. So we have Armand is asked to turn Madeline, and then we end up with Louis deciding to turn her. And then just the experience of turning Madeline was very, very interesting. I do like how they went and kind of had her just have wine. I believe that was wine, right?
Mhm.
Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Chardonnay. Yeah.
She's like, I can't believe I'm having Chardonnay as my last glass of wine.
Yeah.
So
Relatable.
I don't know. I mean, if it was a California Chardonnay, no, but yeah, Chardonnay from like the Loire Valley,
Mm.
thumbs up.
Yeah. Lara would know.
But yeah, that whole I do like how Claudia was pretty much like, no, I don't want her to have Lestat's blood. I want her to have something better. And then Louis like, what? We're not good enough to have somebody else's blood? It's like, first of all, you guys did not have a choice in the
Mhm.
matter.
Very true.
No.
Well, I mean, I guess you kind of had a choice, but then you really didn't have a choice. Kind of
Hey,
situation.
Lestat kind of gave him a choice. I mean, he
Yeah, that's
gave
what
Louis a choice.
Yeah.
And Claudia just has a lot of deep felt hate for Lestat.
Mhm.
And that's the whole point of it. The funny part of it is that Armand fesses up and states, I've never turned anyone in my eternal life so far. And even Louis was dumbfounded going, what? You've never done this? And he outrightly refused to that point. And that's when, Louis stepped up, and he being more of the prime candidate and more prime companion in that relationship to do this. But
Well, Claudia just doesn't have ability to do it. She's too small.
Yeah.
Yes. But the thing is with Louis, and this is how tender that particular scene is when Louis does it, he's very distant from that moment. He's taking a bite from afar. He's not getting too close, not being too up on her throat, not being he feels like he's a distant partner to do this for her. And at the very end, he feels guilt towards it and he reopens his wound, and Armand sees it because he feels bad about what he had done, and he's not sure of what he has done to this person, and now he's linked to that person all this time. And he's not sure or certain if he could uphold as being her mater at that point, or maker. And that's what really bothers Louis at that point. And we do get a little bit of resolution later on during dinner time, which kind of gets abruptly broken up. But the thing is that Louis felt that for the first time and had to do it. But he did it not just because he was asked, but because of the love of Claudia, and to get rid of Claudia so that way he could have Armand to himself. And even Claudia knew that. And it's so sad for the fact that it's like Claudia has her own thing with Madeline. And now Louis being himself, he's like, oh, I could have my thing with Armand, and I could devote all my time to Armand.
Or he even says, like, do you know what, you have me now. Just imagine if I didn't have this burden of Claudia. You just see Claudia's face like, wow, thanks for that. I'm a burden, But it's like, even Claudia knows, because Claudia even mentions, like, I'm not trying to start a fight, but I've always felt like the third wheel.
Yes.
I think Louis tries to kind of old yeller Claudia there, not really make her go away, but he tries to get Armand to sign on to be the blood donor at that point by telling him, oh yeah, she's a burden. But when Claudia asks him later about it, he doesn't really refute it. He just says, well, it worked, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have theories as to why Armand wouldn't change Madeline. I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think the top one would have to be with the fact of his involvement of their destruction. And she makes a comment at dinner that she can feel Louis, and Louis like, I can feel you too. And so I'm pretty sure the feeling of your fledgling being destroyed has to be devastating. And then because Armand was leader of the Paris Coven and he was 500 years old, he wasn't going to be allowed to make vampires, because per their rules, his blood would be so strong he would create powerful progeny, so it would be against their laws to allow him to make vampire progeny. So I think it was a reflex of ancient practice, and then also with the forethought of knowing, oh, I'm about to kill these two, I don't want to be connected to them. So I think that is probably the reason why. And he gives her that ridiculous question before he tells her, I'm not going to do it. He asks her, how would you survive the centuries? And she just kind of gives this like, well, I've been hardened by war and desolation and all this other junk. But it's a silly question to ask anyone who's about to become immortal, because the reality is it's a question of endurance, which is unmeasurable for anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that scene where he's questioning Madeline. Like, it's kind of like he's giving her all these questions before, like someone would get before they do some major surgery or something like that. And like, do you have the problems with this or this? And, he's like, what happens when Claudia loses her mind and just tries to end her life or something like that? And Madeline sticks up for Claudia and says, you don't know, she may make it. She kind of feels like they can do it. And I'm actually, well, it was a little strange when Louis comes in and talks to Claudia and Madeline about changing her and saying, is it romantic? And they both say no, but then Madeline says not yet. And I'm glad that they don't dive too much into it. Not that I would be opposed to the romance. The weird thing, though, and I'm glad that she doesn't think about it until she finds out that Claudia is a vampire, is that, Madeline is like a 30-year-old woman, and Claudia appears to be a 14-year-old girl. And I just don't think that's something
like
the show wants to be putting out there. Yes. He finds out later that Claudia is about 50 years old or so, but I'm like, okay, just don't say that you're having a romantic relationship with a 14-year-old until we get all the details out of the way. Because not that Anne Rice never goes there. But
in the modern world, that would be like, hey, she's a pedophile.
Yeah. But that it's still kind of a weird thing to be showing a 30-year-old woman with a 14-year-old girl. So they keep it on the kind of like sweet loving level at this point. And who knows where we're going to go from here on the show. But I was kind of clocking that and thinking, oh God, they're not going to make them lovers on screen, are they? Because that's going to be weird with a 14-year-old and a 30-year-old.
Exactly.
Well, how old is Haley Bass?
Oh, I think she's in her early 20s.
I was going to say
mid-20s.
But they could still portray it, but they could always have parental guidance moments in the very beginning of the episode. AMC Plus has been very, very much modern with it. It's with what they put out there lately. Look what they did with The Walking Dead, for goodness sakes. With all the blood and gore and everything else that goes on with
it. I will say that as soon as I saw that part where Armand's like, I've never turned a vampire, I immediately text Billie. I'm like, wait, Armand never turned anyone? And without giving too much away, he does tell me who he ends up turning. We won't discuss that, but he does tell me who he turns. Who's the one vampire he does turn. And I'm just like, holy smokes. Okay, interesting. This whole time I thought Armand was like, he had turned everyone, the children of the darkness. I thought he was the maker of all these vampires, but it turns out that he just kind of was handed this coven to run after leaving the Roman coven.
Yep.
And then he's like, I'm tired of this. So he like brings Lestat to kind of destroy it, so that way he doesn't have to be the one to destroy it. And then now I think he's doing the same thing with Louis, and that's his role in the theater of the vampires, is he's getting Louis to get his vengeance and destroy this coven because he wants to be done with it. He doesn't want to deal with the theater of the vampires.
I do also like that we got a little bit more of Madeline's backstory too, which I don't think we got in the books. When Louis is taking her blood and he can see back into her past, and you see that she lost a sister and she lost her parents, how she was abused by society in general for being considered a Nazi sympathizer, them cutting all her hair off and just humiliating her in the streets. We quickly got to feel for Madeline and see some of the torment that she's had in her life.
I do love that sequence. That was one of my one of the high points of the episode, just seeing that and just kind of, because again, we don't see that in the movie, and we don't see that, or we don't hear that or we don't read that in the book. Anything about her background other than in the book, she lost
a daughter.
She lost a daughter. She's a doll maker. We kind of get that premise, but we don't kind of get, any further details on who she is as an individual. So it was kind of cool to see who she was and all the stuff that she went through. So,
and I think that whole scene with Armand and her in the other room, and then the whole transformation scene, that part felt like the art house film to me. Like the way her and Armand were framed on that settee felt very Wes Anderson to me. And then when she sees her little sister in the coffin, and she's got her her lips sewn up, and her two parents flanking her on both sides in their coffins felt very Tim Burton-y, or had this very kind of somber, dark art house feel to me. And as she was being drained by Louis on one side and Claudia on the other, and they shot it kind of upside down with her head hanging in between them, upside down, and them on either side with the real strange lighting and everything. I'm like, oh, this is so art house cool. I should ought to look and see who the director was of this episode.
Oh, I had that. I don't even know who it was. Never mind. Thought I had it, but so then.
Oh, and I think before we get to the last scene, should we bring up the fact that it's revealed that Louis asked Armand to erase his memories from 1973?
Yes.
I don't think I believe that.
Really?
I don't either.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because Armand is a manipulative vampire. He's a manipulative vampire, and he facilitates the destruction of organizations all the time. First with the Paris Coven, and then he facilitates the destruction of the Théâtre des Vampires, and then now I feel like he's trying to destroy some other kind of grouping of some kind. And I feel like the eraser of the memories is part of that. But I do not believe that Louis asked him to do that. I do not believe it, because Louis is a stickler for harping on nostalgia. It is his favorite thing to do. So I do not believe that he asked to have his memories erased.
I also don't believe him because he is just a big fat liar.
And Daniel Malloy does not believe it either, because you see as Louis is kind of melting into Armand, you just see Daniel roll his eyes like, oh God, are you seriously falling for this shit again? Come on. We just established that he's a manipulator like last week. Like, seriously, you're gonna fall back into his lies? Like, yeah. Like, but I guess maybe Armand's charm is working on Louis, but not on Daniel. Daniel's like, nope. He says that he's like, I don't believe you, and he's like, or I don't forgive you, like, because I think Louis says he forgives him, and it's like Daniel's like, I don't forgive you. I don't forgive you for anything, and Armand's like, oh, you being in that drug pen has done something to your brain. And he's like, or maybe the 6 days that I was in your custody, like maybe it had something to do with that.
Yeah. That's Armand trying to manipulate Daniel into thinking all the drugs he did is what messed up his brain, and not, him fiddling there in his head for several days.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
My only question would...
go ahead.
I was going to say, my only question is, what is he trying to undo at this point? Is he trying to facilitate thieving Louis? Maybe he's had enough, or maybe there's another shadowy character in the background trying to push him to do something, because this is Armand's MO, manipulating the characters like in a stage, like on a stage, like in a play. He's directing. That's what he's always done for 500 plus years. That's what he's done, is direct. So,
and I have to say, the way they've written the character and the way he's played by Assad Zaman. I always get his name wrong. Samad. Yeah, he's just excellent the way he's being portrayed, because he always seems like the victim, and we always feel so sorry for him.
Which always makes me think, all right, I'm sure you all have seen Stargate.
No.
Just the movie.
Oh, wait, I think I saw it a long time ago when I was a teenager one time.
The one who played Ra, who was very young Egyptian, Ahmad Zamad, reminds me of that particular actor, and who wasn't even an actor for that film. Just the look, pristine face, the hair, everything. And it's like, but in this case, Ahmad Zamad is amazing with his acting ability and his eyes and how he's able to emote. I'm like, I probably have the biggest man crush of any heterosexual for this guy because he's pretty and he's able to do these things. And I'm like, wow, I'm really enjoying his work. I want to see him in more stuff.
He's got you, Mark.
Yeah, he
I
got
was
me.
gonna say, not you too.
His powers are working.
Yeah, his eyes.
All right, so then continuing to this whole trend of Armand, we pretty much see that Armand has betrayed Louis, as we see this amazing sequence of them catching up at the cafe with Claudia and Madeline, who ventured away and then have come back. And so I definitely said Armand, in quotation, leaves the theater of the vampires. And then, of course, we get the best ending of an episode as we see Sam walk down the stairs and say, Lestat, we need you up there in 10 minutes.
Yep.
And then we're just like, and then I am like, holy smokes.
My mouth hit the floor and I thought, is this a dream? And then I knew Lara right away. It's like, yes. Only watching
I
it.
audibly squealed and clapped my hands.
I sat up in bed because I was watching it in bed, and I was like, no.
Yeah, I was when they were sitting there having a good time, I was like, oh, this is such a good like thing. And then Armand just gets up and he goes to the door, and then all of a sudden you just see Armand's face, watch Santiago rush towards him, and then everything freezes, and then you just see Louis' face just kind of like become numb, and then he's like, what's happening? Why is the room frozen? And then
Mhm.
you just see the vampires just put bags over their heads, and I'm just like, what's going on? What? Because Armand's like, I was given a choice, and he's trying to make it sound like he chose to leave the theater of the vampires, but I don't feel like that's what the choice was. I think the
No.
choice was to probably get rid of them. Either it was like get rid of myself and them, or just them.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where that's gonna go. Is Armand's like, my choice was to live and not like die,
Mhm.
with them, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think somehow in this bargain he made with Santiago and the troupe, he somehow must get out of it with Louis. And then
Correct.
we don't know what happens to Claudia and Madeline.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we do see the abrupt attack within the restaurant where they're literally thrown into what would it be, body bags or some sort of bag, and bagged and taken out. And you could see it on Louis' face that he knew what the hell was going on, but he was, of course, saved within this moment. And I think in the back of Armand's head, he goes, well, that was part of the play. These were the gifts that were needed for the play. And that's why they have one night only for this trial.
Matinee.
Yeah. A matinee, which
Yeah.
is
First and only.
extremely suspect.
Yeah.
How many vampires do a play in the afternoon?
Right.
Or morning.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's in the morning.
Oh, it just clicked in my head.
Oh
my God.
You got it?
Matinee.
Live reaction, everybody. Danny realizes right now what's going on and what's the potential.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Hmm.
Oh, son of a batch of cookies.
That's why I said earlier. I was like, I don't think they're getting out of this alive.
Yeah.
Too much sunlight out there.
Yeah, and that ending scene when we finally do see Lestat. First of all, God, Sam Reid has a voice of an angel. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
It is just silken smooth and cool. And when he's, what does he say? He says like 10 minutes or something. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer, but Like there's just one scene where he's ripping off his coat as he's walking across the catwalk, and I'm like, that scene alone is going to speak so much for next episode.
Exactly.
And I was just telling myself, yes, Daddy is home, and the shit is going to hit the proverbial fan.
Yeah.
I am really grateful that they kept Lestat as he's supposed to be in the series. I mean, Lestat is a creature above it all and beside it all, and that he was what got me into the series. It wasn't at first. It was Louis because a little 14-year-old queer boy in the Midwest, someone who's mopey and kind of poetic, and I'm like, okay, that's me. And then I meet Lestat, and I'm like, oh no, that's me.
The aggressor. I'm here.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
I'm
And
the
then
bear.
he's fantastic, and like I love the scene where it shows the flashback when he initially gets to Paris after being first turned, and he's got the wolf-lined red cloak on, and I screamed. I was like, that's what I thought it looked like.
Yeah. Yeah. And you realize who's the bear and who's the cub in this case, if you think about it. And it's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, and we get to see Louis, Madeline, and Claudia on the stage, and they have turned the entire audience into the jury for this play. And they are obviously going to set up a play about a mock trial, which will not be a mock trial because they are putting all three of them on trials for crimes against vampirism.
Which probably is what Sam had written that Armand didn't read completely through for the whole script. It's just that it was the subtext that they were like, okay, we'll go over it. We've only gone into maybe the first act. And that's all that Santiago was really reading with everybody else. And then by the second act, it goes right into the trial of who they bring in, and that's literally where everything unfolds. So they actually wrote out the script for this play, which is the trial. And little unbeknownst to Armand, since he probably didn't read it too much, he's like, oh, okay, and then didn't realize, oh crap, Lestat's here. He's alive. But and I have to say kudos to Ben Daniels of his physique, because I don't know if you noticed on him on stage sitting there how muscular that man is at his age. Oof. I wish I could be that way at age 60.
Yeah. They use actual quotes from the novel for the stage play.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Like the whole triad on when Louis is supposedly telling Lestat he's leaving, Lestat starts to mock him and berate him, and they use that for the stage.
Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, the title of this episode comes from that same soliloquy, doesn't it? Because he says it on stage, doesn't he?
It sounds
like the light. I think. What was it? Like the light by which God made the world before He made light.
Yes.
All Anne's words.
Yep.
I think anytime you hear anything in the dialogue that sounds very poetic, it's Anne.
Yeah.
Think filigree and it's Anne's. If it sounds like filigree, it's Anne's. Love it.
That throws a lot of my thoughts out the window, because here my thought process was Lestat has is drained and rotting away and not like himself this whole time, and then we see in the last episode where Armand calls Lestat to let him know that here's Louis trying to commit suicide, and so I'm like, oh, that's weird. So back in 1973, Lestat's alive. I mean, not that we didn't know he was alive, but I didn't realize how strong he was, because if he's strong at the Theater of the Vampires, and this is I don't know what time period that takes place. I'm assuming it's going to be 30 years prior to the first interview.
Yeah.
Because they were they were together for 30 years. So 30 years. I mean, I don't know how Louis does not know where Lestat is, or how Lestat can be himself and not intervene in Armand and Louis' relationship at this point. Because I thought the only reason he had not been meddling in the whole situation is because Armand, or sorry, Lestat was like rotting away and was just this, corpse that was was not full strength. And even Billie informed me that he is part of the trial of Claudia and Louis and Madeline, but he's not himself. So go ahead, tell him, tell
Oh,
everyone what you said.
well, in the novel, he's still that husk scarecrow that's been bloodied, and I think he gets burnt by fire just a little bit. But having been born with the blood of Magnus, he kind of has immunity to the sort of total annihilation that fire brings. But um, in the book, he feeds Santiago all the information he needs to allow the execution. And Santiago suspects it in the novels because Louis acts really, Louis and Claudia act really suspicious. They're always closing their minds. And Louis always harping on his relationship with Lestat, which, by the way, I would suggest that the reason why Louis thinks about Lestat all the time is not just because he loves him, but because that's his maker. And his thoughts are always going to return to his maker. Because I always think about that scene where Madeline tells Louis, I can feel you. But in the novel, when he runs away from the mob, and before they take him and put him in the box. And as he's running away from the mob, he finds Lestat sort of withered in this chair, and he basically says, she shouldn't have been one of us. This was a mistake to make her. And you have to forgive me and that kind of thing. And he restates to Lestat, no, you're a monster, and now I hate you forever. But Lestat does make an appearance in Paris during that time, and I'm pretty certain that he gives Santiago the final proof of their mutiny, so that way he can kill and destroy Claudia. Because there's something about her presence, besides the fact that it goes against their ancient laws, that just frightens all of them. It makes and unnerves them that there's a child vampire in their midst.
Yeah. And I think they gave us the description that they were afraid that because she was so young that she would be able to survive like centuries of being a vampire, that her mind would deteriorate because of the fact that she's so young and unable to age and mature like a normal person would, because she would be stuck in this body. I mean, in the book, she's 4 or 5 years old. Here in the show, yeah. And I think in the movie they make her more like 7 or
12.
is it
She's about
12?
12, yeah.
12, and then now we have her at 14. And I mean, at 14, who really knows what's going on in the world? You're not mature. I think they say that a person, like a woman's brain, gets mature like at what, 24, and a man's in like 27 or 28, something like that.
They're kind of.
Yeah, I think I've heard reports that the like human hypothalamus does not mature until about 25 to 27.
Yeah.
My quip with her being 14, though, is that in her time period, technically speaking, she could have taken care of herself and been a quote unquote adult woman. And the logic with Claudia was that because she was a 5-year-old girl forever, she would not be able to live independently. She would always need to have some sort of servant relationship with somebody. And essentially that's what all the relationships are in the vampire world, is master and servant. It's all about bondage and slavery. But with Claudia, it would be more dire, more important, because she couldn't just be, she could definitely do, what's that movie, Let the Right One In? Where she tricks some human man into taking care of her and being her father figure, and she has to do this over and over and over again until eternity. But vampires are supposed to be known for their strength, and Anne makes a point in the novels to say that people are chosen for their fierceness and their beauty.
Their youthfulness, but not extreme youthfulness,
right?
And also that also has to as for the submissive, it's almost like a Renfield thing too with
Mhm.
Dracula itself, if we all remember that. And I need my bugs.
Well, I do want to say that I don't know why this popped in my head, but I realized that in the movies or in the book, I'm assuming as well, they they're not able to alter their appearance. So being able to, because even we
To
have Claudia, who chops off her hair and it grows back instantly. And
yes,
so here in the show, we see that Louis' hairstyle changes from like one time period to the other time period. So I'm interested to see if that happens with Lestat, if he does show up in the present time and he all of a sudden he has like a cool hip haircut,
do
Mhm.
to
you think
match
he's a
like
hipster? I don't. I can't envision Lestat with a mullet cut
Nah.
with a
No.
southern accent.
He
Especially
is
as a
far too fashionable for that.
yeah,
No,
and
no,
especially
he's always going to look like Sebastian Bach from Skid Row, in my
yeah.
opinion.
Well, I
I
mean,
think they. Oh, go ahead, Billy.
I was gonna say with the next season, I hope it gets into some of the Queen of the Dam stuff. But he's supposed to be
Amen.
a singer of a band, and it's
Mhm.
like, given the time period, she always described him as being like John Bon Jovi
Mhm.
in the novels, which I was like, girl, no. But but like with the twist that they like to do in the show, I'm really hoping that it takes on a more like post-punk type vibe, and
Mhm.
I
More
wonder what they're gonna.
gothic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say more
Yeah.
Pete Steele or
Oh, well, Pete still would be awesome, but I was thinking
yeah?
more, yeah. But I was thinking more like Fields of Nephilim, or maybe even Andrew Eldritch.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, I can
definitely
see
like
that.
Well, when Stuart Townsend played him in Queen of the Damned, the movie, his performance was a lot more kind of industrial goth.
new metal. Yeah,
Yes. That was during that time of new metal
yeah,
at that point, and they were riding on the heels of that, especially with Marilyn Manson and everything. So
yeah,
they were playing on with the music aspect, but he still looked like the pretty boy with the blonde hair and the long hair,
yeah.
especially when he flies in and flutters in. So, but not to give too much away, everybody. I'm sure you have watched it because we recommended it.
All right, I think that's pretty much our show breakdown. Does anybody have any notes that that we didn't get to cover?
No.
I think my one note was, and it's not even really a note, but they did the whole scene with Armand and Louis talking about turning Madeline in front of the Sacre Coeur in Paris, and that is probably one of my favorite spots in Paris. I mean, I think it's not as iconic as the Eiffel Tower, but I think it's more beautiful. So I really love that they did that at the bottom of the stairs of the Sacre Coeur.
Mm.
They got to show some scenes of Paris. I know they shot most of this in Prague, but I
Mhm.
think for the iconic scenes in front of important, memorable buildings, they shot those in Paris.
Mhm.
That's cool. How about you, Billy? Do you have any notes that you want to share?
There's not enough hours in the day.
And folks, we will have a little bit of a book talk at the end of the show. So
Yes.
if you don't want to be spoiled on book spoilers, we'll just be having a quick discussion at the end so you can turn off the podcast early and not be spoiled.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. So, how about any quotes? Does anybody have any quotes that caught their attention?
I love that quote that is in Claudia's diary, where she says, "Diaries are friends of last resort," and nothing was so poignant and like a shaft of light into the heart until I heard that, and I was like, oh man, how many times in my life have I felt like I had nothing but some pages in a journal that I could just regurgitate thoughts into? Because in the early years when Facebook was still pretty new, people used to bug you, or I guess bully you, if you put too many posts on Facebook. So I got really into journaling because of that. Because it's like, well, I have all these feelings, I don't know where to put them. So then I just journaling.
Oh, you create a blog.
Oh well. But I just like that quote a lot. And then she follows it up with "F those vampires," and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that works best. It's enough said.
My favorite line, and again, it was a delivery line because Sam Daniels delivers it so well, is when he has his diva moment on stage and throws the papers up in the air and says, "We do horror shows so we can eat people." Throws his papers, his script up in the air, and then as he walks past Sam, he kind of gives him a telepathic pat on the back, and he says, "Great script, Sam."
I do love that. I have the with Claudia when she's asking to make Madeline into a vampire. Claudia pretty much tells Louis, "You were Lestat's, now you're Armand's," and then Louis like, "Or Armand is mine," trying to establish that he's the dominant one now.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Nice try.
Oh man. I have one that is interesting, and this is in the very beginning. Daniel actually states it. He goes, "A little more vermouth next time, Rashid." And Rashid goes, "I can make another." And Daniel goes, "No, it's good. Just his were better." And pointing to Armand.
I love that too. That was such a sick burn.
It was like
he basically was telling Armand that he liked him better when he was a servant.
Yeah.
I didn't even put those two together, but yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah.
All right, so since we have no more quotes, we're gonna go ahead and move into the feedback, and we have a couple feedbacks. So, Laura, do you want to do the first one?
Sure. Our first bit of feedback comes from Alma Contreras, and she says, "I was so glad to be back in Paris for this episode. I really have enjoyed Claudia's story, even though I kind of know what is to come. When the dressmaker was being attacked, I was hoping Claudia would save her. And wow, how crazy fast did she swoop in? Did I understand Armand correctly when he said he had not created a vampire before? All those years he's been a vampire and all that power, and he has never created one? I wonder why not. I was actually starting to empathize with Armand until he stood by and let things go down. He could have stopped it. Next episode should be really good. OMG, and I almost forgot. Woohoo, Lestat is back. Can't wait to tune into the next cast and hear y'all's thoughts."
Yes.
Thanks, Alma. And yeah, we're all glad that Lestat is back in the building.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Bill, you want to read the next feedback here?
Sure. This one comes from Becky Anderson. She says, "Claudia stole the show in this one. She was brilliant. Her maturity dealing with Louis and Armand and how calm she remained while they were yelling and screaming. Loved every scene with her and Madeleine. Also, Madeleine's calm and honesty while talking with Armand was so good. She gave as good as she got. The dinner scene, I knew as soon as Armand left the table that Santiago was coming in that scene and that ending. Oh my gosh, wow. I think this is the best episode of the series so far. Super excited for next week. I know y'all mentioned hearing more about me getting to be in a focus group for the show. I'll see if I can figure out how to send a voice message."
Yes, please do so. Oh wait, actually, we may be having her
Next
yeah,
week.
okay.
She'll be here next week, everybody. Just to clue you in, I spoke to her earlier while I was at work on a job, and Becky sent in a message through Adrenaline Cinema Podcast's FP page. So she has a microphone, she has headphones. So she's going to be on next week and helping us with our coverage for episode 7 of Interview with the Vampire Season 2. So look forward to that. And she's going to give us a little bit more detail about that focus group, her thoughts and her feelings and how it went. But right now, we got some voicemail. I thought I had voicemail from Onwin, but no, that was for another podcast. I kind of jumped the gun. I'm hoping Onwin does, because she actually did mention her interest in Interview with the Vampire. So if, Onwin, out in New Zealand, please send us some feedback. It'd be awesome if you could. But right now, we got more feedback and voice feedback from Sam. So I'm going to play that now.
Hi, it's Sam. Oh, episode 6. Oh, it was so funny and so good. If you had told me that episode 6 was going to be about Claudia and Madeleine's a vampiric love story taking a big leap forward, I would have been like, oh gosh, this sounds so boring. But it wasn't at all. I loved it. It was so beautiful. And I agree with Jacob Anderson on the behind the scenes. The actress who plays Madeline, I don't remember her name, and Delaney Hayes are incredible together. They are so magnetic, like Jacob Anderson said, and just such a beautiful duo on screen. And Delaney Hayes has my heart. Oh, she's such a good Claudia. Like, just like the little expressions on her face. I don't know, like, if I saw her murdering my assailants and then she just like looked at me like that, I don't think I would scream and run. Like, she's so amazing. So it was just such a good show and such a good episode, and everything is done so wonderfully with these actors. The cattiness of the Théâtre des Vampires, I can't say it as good as Lara does, is so good. I'm going to miss those guys. They're just so catty and cranky. I love it. And I'm with it. I'm with Daniel. He's like, you didn't hear them conspiring. And even Louis was like, seriously? And Armand is still trying to fake it. He's like, it's love. It's like, it's bullshit is what it is. You were complicit. Yes. I think you guys, I'm sorry, I can't remember which one of you thought, was it you, Danni, who said that Armand has been in on this the whole time? Like, maybe he didn't orchestrate it, but he's been in on the coven planning Claudia's downfall from the beginning. I'm like, ooh, I bet that's true, because that totally fits with his character from the books, his character from the show, the manipulations. So I was like, oh, I bet you that's it. And we saw further proof. He's trying to pretend, I think, that he regrets it now. We saw in last week's episode that there's a lot of Armand that we're not seeing in his filtered memories of Louis. And it's like, I totally believe he is a petty, petty little man. Like, he's this wonderful ancient vampire with a really sad backstory and also a petty, petty vampire. So it's very interesting to see how this sort of plays out. And I do believe maybe he feels a little bad because he didn't expect Louis to become, I'm guessing, suicidal from this. I don't think he feels that bad. And then the turning of Madeline into a vampire, they had an intimacy coordinator. I'm like, that's why it was so beautiful. I loved it. It was just so nice, and I'm so glad they have intimacy coordinators on these shows. It just makes it so much more artistic and creative and beautiful to watch. We saw Lestat Diddley in the theater. I am here for this court farce play that they're going to be doing. Oh my gosh, next week's going to be amazing. Is it next Sunday yet? Is it next Sunday? Can we watch it? This is all going to be amazing with these immortal theater nerds putting on this play in front of an audience, and then Lestat comes in. Oh my gosh. And it's also, I can kind of wait the 6 more days because I don't want to say goodbye to Claudia. She was finally happy. Oh my goodness. So I'm looking forward to the episode and hearing what y'all have to say as we go to the ultimate episode and the end of the season pretty soon.
Oh, that was great.
That was great.
And I looked up that actress's name who played Madeline. Her name is Roxanne Duran. And yeah, she's doing a fantastic job as Madeline. And yes. I agree with you, Sam. Next week is going to be a total kangaroo court. So I am here for it.
Yeah. All right.
Well, that wraps things up for this episode. If you would like to leave us some feedback or just say hi, you can send us an email or a voice message at talk@podcastica.com.
And if you head to podcastica.com, there's a handy voice message link. Check us out on the social media feedback on Facebook, which would be facebook.com/podcastica. We can be found on Twitter @Podcastica, and on Instagram @HousePodcastica. So while you're there, if you haven't already, check out the other podcasts on the Podcastica network, like, that would be the Sandman cast that I'm doing with Jamie. We actually just finalized our the finale episode of Dead Boy Detectives, which is a spinoff of Sandman. So check that out. You could also hear Run for Your Lives with Daphne and Paige. There's also Strange Indeed, and they just started everything off with Sweet Tooth for the past week or two, and what else? The House of the Dragon with
Yes,
Wendy.
I am going to jump on House of the Dragon because the first episode just came out this Sunday. My husband is all caught up on season 1, so we are going to jump into season 2 together, and I can't wait to see what the ladies have to say about that episode.
Yes.
I have not even watched the first season, and everybody is talking about this last episode, and I am like, okay, maybe I need to jump in on this bandwagon because I am apparently missing a lot because TikTok's been spoiling a lot of things. They're like, this happens in the book and it's different from what's going on in the episode. And I'm all like, wait, don't listen to this. Scroll, keep scrolling, keep scrolling.
Lara,
I highly recommend it. And the podcast helps to get you to understand it too, because there are lots of characters and places that you need to remember.
Yeah,
I think that's why I couldn't get into the books, the Game of Thrones books, because there was so much. Like, there's like 100 different characters that were being introduced, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to bother remembering like all these characters' names. So that's probably why I didn't want to get into the House of the Dragon. And plus, I'm still triggered by the ending of Games of Thrones. I don't know if I want to.
I skipped the last season. I get all the way up to that point, and I just skip that season altogether. You know what, Lara? Is it me, or did the first season of House of the Dragon, didn't they have like a foot fetish or some weird thing going on with that season?
Alicent and her advisor, whose name slips my mind at the moment, but he's just as bad, if not worse, than Littlefinger.
Oh my!
And he's got a foot fetish.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like Quentin Tarantino on steroids if you watch it, everybody. But it's your choice. But I'm looking to binge watch it when it's completely done because I have way too much. I have a lot on my plate when it comes to podcasts. I got The Boys coming out. I got Deadpool Wolverine coming out. So I'm kind of spreading myself a little thin. We're coming to the end game of Interview with the Vampire, the last 2 episodes here on Adrenaline Cinema Podcast, as well as House Podcast. It's a collaborative podcast, everybody. So please spread the word if you can. But I could also be found on Panels to Pixels podcast, where Steve Brown and I are covering Dark Matter. So if you have not clued yourself into Apple TV Plus with Dark Matter, I highly recommend it. It's a sci-fi based show that is done very well. It's got Jennifer Connelly in it. And we are just flabbergasted. If you like multiversal kind of things, it's amazing. Have fun with it. And then we'll be back with The Boys. We're probably going to do 4 episodes in a row just to do overall coverage. And then obviously Fantasy Picks Movie Edition with Rob Moda, Adam Gonzalez, Frank Rodriguez, and myself. And we'll be catching you up on what's going on with Fantasy Picks Movie Edition for the Pirate Core Entertainment Network. So with that, what do we have next week? What's going on?
Next week, we are covering season 2, episode 7, the penultimate, I Could Not Prevent It.
Yes. Okay, that covers this episode. Thank you, Billie, for joining us on this episode. And we are going to hopefully have you back for the season finale because it would be interesting to get your feedback for that last episode.
And thank you, guys. I'm listed, so...
Awesome.
Okay, I'm Danni.
And I'm Mark.
And I'm Lara.
And I'm Billie. And this was the Vamp Cast.
Thanks for listening. And stick around if you want to hear a little book talk.
Yes, because then now I get to talk about Armand and this conversation that I had with Billie on who Armand turns into a vampire. Go ahead, take it.
Do we want to blow someone's mind? Anyone's mind?
You
Or
can
do we
blow
want to
my
make
mind.
it exciting for? Okay, you don't mind a spoiler then,
Okay.
Mark, right?
No, I don't mind. I'm
Okay.
used to it. Whatever.
Well, Armand, I think he makes a total of 3 vampires in the whole series.
No,
And which is funny because the last 2 he makes are children.
really?
Oh,
Yeah. There's Benji and I think his sister. Benji is like this like street smarts, fast talking little Arab boy who ends up running this like radio station for their vampire island called the Night Island. And then it moves to Manhattan at one point. But it's like, yeah, you gotta read the subsequent books. It gets well after her break in like the early 2000s, she starts writing another series with like Blood Communion and Vampire Lestat and the Realms of Atlantis, and that's when it gets into like this weird space where I was like, I'm a fan, so I'm gonna read it, but as a person who appreciates vampires, I don't like this.
Yeah, I've heard people don't like those later books as much.
Yeah, it was sort of like
I heard that Prince Lestat is pretty good though, so I look
is.
forward to that.
It is. She had a huge fascination with like UFOs and stuff and ideas of ancient aliens. And she thought, I think I'm just going to wrap up this whole series by adding that. And then it was like, you find out who Amel really is and where he originates from. And then you're like, so vampires are the children of extraterrestrials? Like,
Well, that factors into the Taltos in the Witching series as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. I actually have a copy of Lasher signed by
Oh,
her.
wow.
Yeah, it's like a vintage copy, like huge hardcover, which is funny because I never got through those books. But but I was like, I have to have this. Anyways, so back to Armand and his first progeny. He actually turns Daniel into a vampire.
But back in the 70s, right? Not
was-
even so much the 70s.
It was the early 80s. He was
Yeah.
29 when he was turned into a vampire.
Because it happens in Queen of the Damned,
Right.
which
And
is why I didn't want to say anything about it. But yeah.
Basically, Daniel's like, I'm privy to the vampire reality. I want to join you. You will like make me into a vampire, or I'll drink myself to death. And Armand was like, I love you too much, but also I don't want you to have to deal with this. And then basically Daniel almost dies, and then Armand reluctantly gives him the blood.
Interesting.
And then soon after he gets the blood, he's like, all right, I'm outie. And then he like goes on a wandering thing for a long time until he goes crazy. The blood makes him go
A
insane.
walkabout.
And then Marius finds him and goes, wow, you're an interesting little duck. And then he basically like babysits him until his brain fixes. Like he literally comes back to sanity.
Huh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder how they're going to play that in the show. Like if it actually will like work out that way, because, Daniel's in his 70s now.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if they're going to switch him out for David Talbot. Because David had to do the whole body switching thing before he became a vampire.
I was going to mention that in the thing, because at the very beginning, when Raglan James says to Daniel, if I could swap bodies with you, I would have the whole order, under my control.
Absolutely.
And that was a total title drop, because I haven't got to it yet, but I know for sure that Raglan James is a character in Tale of the Body Thief, which is the next book after Queen of the Damned.
And you know what's so funny about that book that I always crack up about? Anne has such a fascination with masculinity in the male form, but when she describes Lestat going to the bathroom for the first time in like hundreds of years, she has nothing nice to say about his equipment. And I'm just like, what is up with this?
She doesn't like
well,
men.
I get to look forward to that one. I kind of highly doubt that. And from what I hear, she almost preferred to write from the male gaze and the male perspective, because every time she wrote the female, because the Vampire Chronicles, that's why it's so highly masculine, that most of the characters are males. And that's why she wrote the Witching Hour and the Mayfair Witches Chronicles, which were supposed to be her books that kind of took things from a female perspective. But a lot from what I've heard from other people, when she writes about females, she doesn't seem to write great female characters, and you almost don't get to like them until they're paired with a male character. Like
That is so
Rowan in
wild.
Witching Hour
Yeah.
is fairly unlikable. Although I mean, I have sometimes I love her and sometimes I hate her. But you know, you almost start to empathize with her more when she gets paired with Michael Curry, her love interest in the
Huh.
book.
Well, Anne has always had like a weird relationship with transgenderism because her actual name, her real actual legal name is Howard. Her father gave her a man's name when she was born because he was privy to the fact that it's a man's world. So when she went to, I think, Catholic school for the first time, the nun asked her what her name was, and she's like, my name's Anne," because she didn't want to be like, "Oh, I'm the girl named Howard." But she's always
wow.
had this like weird. It's like I would describe her as soft transgenderism. Like she liked the idea of being a man, played with the idea of being a man, but never accepted the reality where she could be a man. And maybe she enjoyed being a woman in some aspects. You know, she had her son and her daughter, and she had that great love affair with Stan Rice. And so I think in parts of her psyche, she wanted to be a man, or she thought of herself as a man. And it might have been because of her father, or it might have been being, you know, a woman in a Catholic environment. And I feel like her atheism and her exploration of masculinity are mixed, or not mixed, but linked.
Yeah, it could be for the fact that her outlet for her masculinity of how she felt came out in her writing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anything that was femininity, it just sucked. in
Right.
Mayfair
Exactly.
Witches.
Or even
I
her
mean,
pinned.
there's
I
very
was gonna say,
there's some crazy things that go on in the Mayfair Witches, which Rima and I both agreed. I don't know how they're going to put this on screen because there's a lot of rape and incest and
Yeah.
underaged
Pedophilia.
Yeah.
pedophilia going on.
Oh
It's
my
hard to
God.
read sometimes.
Yeah, it's
And
wackadoo.
so we were like, how are they going to make that into a series? And we know now they just changed the whole story and they didn't even think about
Yeah.
the books. They snagged some of the names from the book and then got rid of the rest of
Rewrote
the
it.
plot.
Yeah, they just basically wrote their own story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
we
see-
also have. Oh, go ahead, Billy. Sorry.
I was gonna say, so Laura, you can understand why, like, when you were watching the Mayfair Witches, you were like shaking your fist at the TV, but you're also like, well, if this is as close to what I'm gonna get from this book, then I guess I have to try to like it.
I put it on in the background sometimes just to see the images of New Orleans, which are nice, but I don't
Oh my
want to
God.
listen to it or acknowledge
Yeah.
it.
Have you been?
Have I been?
Yeah, have you been to any of the houses or?
Oh,
food
I've been
quarter?
to New Orleans. I haven't got to go to the houses or anything.
Oh,
Oh.
they're so pretty. Oh my gosh.
Yes, I imagine. I love New Orleans. I have family who lives down there. I'd like to go back someday.
I went in 2021, I think, and we went to one of the houses, and there's some people in the backyard, which I think the house that I was in front of was the house she wrote the Mayfair Witch books in. And I could hear them talking, and I wanted to bang on the wall, like, "Let me in! You don't realize? Give me some of just a little bit of that Anne Rice energy. Just let me in the foyer." Like,
Aw.
So I have one question as a book reader, but Danny, I think you were going to try and say something first.
Well, I was going to say, she even used a pen name and wrote the Sleeping Beauty series, which was very rapey in the sense of a different version of the Sleeping Beauty and how men dominated women.
Yeah, I tried to get through that and could only get through like half of it. And then I like double timed my Audible and I'm like, I can't even finish it this way. I had to stop.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering. So in the books, it was Lestat who changed Claudia because he used it as a way to manipulate Louis to stay with him. But in the show, it's Louis who begs Lestat to change Claudia, and he doesn't want to. So how do you think that kind of changes the tone of the show as opposed to the book?
well, there's a lot that goes into that dynamic. They use a lot of social aspects of racial social aspects in the show that aren't really used in the novel. And I kind of got the sense that I think Louis was trying to distance himself from Lestat's sort of old world whiteness, I guess. So he was I think he was inviting another character of color, or not character of color, but a creature of color into his house so that way he could have that sort of upper hand because I was watching the season 1 today as I was working, and I forgot that Louis gets a lot of crap in New Orleans for being he was supposed to be a jeune couleur libre, which would have meant he would have better standing in that society. But he says in the first episode that didn't matter anymore, that racism was racism. It didn't matter what your ancestor was once upon a time. So I kind of saw it as that. I don't think there was like a paternal desire from Louis to do that. I think it was just more of a, I want to invite more color into this house because Lestat was an old world white guy. And so that's what I got from that. But in the novels, it was definitely a tactic of manipulation, and Louis became a reluctant father. And it might have been just because of his he was still mourning the death of his brother Paul, who had been supposedly pushed off the edge of the landing and tumbled down the stairs. And it could have just been a desire to nurture something smaller than himself, you know? So
I felt like it seems like Claudia was supposed to be his redemption in the show because his sort of reckless action caused the burning down of Storytown or Storyville. I forget what it was called, Storyville. Yeah, it got burnt down. I mean, all because of his one kind of reckless action. And so he felt by saving this one girl, he could feel redeemed from that. And I wonder if that, like when he tells her, he tells Armand, can you imagine you and me without her as a burden? And he doesn't deny it when she asks him again. I wonder if he subliminally feels that like she has had to be the redemption that he's had to carry this whole time. And I mean, it's great that she gets her freedom too, because I also meant to say that, you know, it seemed like Madeline and Claudia would have been the most stable relationship in this entire series if it were to last, because they actually seem to have caring and love towards each other, and neither one is the creator of the other, so they're not going to have that hostility with each other either. But I just found it interesting that you can't blame Lestat for that now. You can't say Lestat tried to make a baby trap to keep Louis, because it was Louis' request to have it done.
And he kind of admits that too when he's transforming Madeline. He says that he can tell that Madeline would love her better, and more wholeheartedly than he ever did. So there was sort of, I don't want to say that confirmed my theory to me, but it definitely was like, okay, well, definitely Claudia was a chess piece in Louis' gambit against Lestat in some way. So there was definitely a desire to sort of stratify power in that household. And I think Claudia was the what they call it when you have a tie and you have that one person that breaks the tie.
Tiebreaker?
Yeah, I think there's another word for it, but yeah, for lack of a better term, tiebreaker. So
yeah.
Oh, anything else you want to cover?
Billie's like, where do I begin? It started in 1973 when Anne Rice wrote this first book.
We'll save that for another podcast. That's that.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us at this part of the podcast where we talked a little bit about our book and what the book inspired as the show continues.
Yep. So we'll talk to you guys later.
Night.
Bye-bye.